Welcome everyone this Saturday, Memorial Day weekend 2026. Running a bass workshop today on riff structure derivatives, and I'll label the set later when it becomes a conversion reshare. Getting you all centered online here. This is totally live from my home studio in Northern Vermont, USA, which I know most of you probably know it's USA, but we're going to do a little music from one of my recent solo bass sets, Ouija board bondage. So we'll give you a little bit of that while I'm setting up. And welcome everybody. I'm Chuck, the bass player. Gotta have a bass, gotta have an amp. There you go. Gotta have a tuner. Buy a new AC this season. Lasts about 5 or 6 years. Like every other Chinese made piece of junk. About 5 or 6 years and it's done. So. So that's you can go back and check that out. That's one of my recent sets, Ouija board bondage, and it's a set of original hard rock solo bass using my processor, and that is Dr. Smooth's debut on video. Aside from the show I did last week with the Nobby Reed Project out on the Twig stage here in St. Albans, Vermont, that was the actual debut. It's funny, I got this, and 4 hours later, I was out on stage with Nobby. That's pretty cool. All right, let's get a volume check here. working to me. Good old American P bass, never fail you. So, as I was saying in the introduction, I am Chuck the bass player, three-time national award-winning bassist, 2 from Billboard magazine, 1 from the University of Virginia, and 10 pro albums, 1 record deal offered on 1 of those albums from Atlantic Records subsidiary, over 4,500 shows performed, and the extent of my music education is 4 years in a Mount Anthony jazz band and 1 year of music theory class, and then the rest is all self-taught through my own training and studies over the years. I've been a professional bass player since 1983, which is probably longer than some of you have been alive. And others of you are more experienced than I am, right? Musicians, I'm talking about. Well, maybe there's others who are experienced at other things. Shh, we won't get into that. So this really is I would have to say more of the exciting part of what people like to see me do, and that's soloing. So what I want to do is I want to get into soloing concepts, in other words, riff derivative, and where they come from, and what I do to change those riffs into something to make my own. And that's basically how I do it and how I've always done it since I was a kid, and that's how I always will do it, because that's how I do it. That's how I learned from the big pros at a very young age. And I was out there in the professional music realm, local circuit stuff, when I was a teenager, because my cousins had a professional band for years before I came along, like decades before I came along. So they were way more experienced than I was at that time. And so that was my doorway into professional music. I had my own band called Steel for a few years before I joined them. And that was really just a party band. And, none of us were 21. We were just kids, so we couldn't get into the venues. This other band that I had joined, my cousin's band, however, was, they were older than me by, I don't know, 10 years or something, 15, more than that, even 10, 15 years, whatever it was. And yeah, because they're like almost my parents' age, so 15 years or so. So, they were way more experienced than I was at that time. So that's really what got me into it. Not to get into my whole entire player history, which I'm sure most of you could care less about, but just for newcomers coming into my content who don't know my history, there you go. Played in numerous bands all over the tri-state area for many, many years. Currently, I'm just doing open forum shows with other artists instead of doing committed bands. Over the last year and a half-ish, I've done numerous open forum shows. My plan is to do at least, I don't know, I did 40 last year, maybe 60 this year. I don't know. I'll do as many as I can. We'll put it that way. We'll see where it ends up at the end of this season, but it just seems to work for me. The reason why so that brings me to the next piece. I'm going to take this off before I start putting scratches in Dr. Smooth when I've only owned them for a week. And we'll put on the I don't care what time it is watch. See? There it is right there. This is the I don't care what time it is watch. See? What time is it, Chuck? It's about that time. So what? So we're getting to the playing here in just a minute. I just wanted to kind of finish up the monologue and move into the playing. So I'm not a teacher. I had 5 years of college for business communications and med school, pre-med. So that has nothing to do with music. But so I went to an Ivy League school in Boston. But basically, what's brought me to the musical realm was just my interest in music in the beginning. Really just listening to records, pulling stuff off records. As a drummer, started out on drums at 7 years old, and then moved into guitar for a little bit, and then I jumped right into bass, and then guitar kind of came back to me later on. And guitar really has always just been writing tool for me, and this has really been my main tool. Guitar is more of a toy. This is a tool, and the analogy of the way things go. So basically, I decided to scrap the cover project version of August Theory because, number one, it's just too time consuming for me to do guitar and vocals, and that's all I have time for is cover song classics and bookings, and it's just a pain in the rear end. It's too much for me to invest. Where not money wise, but I mean time wise. I already have killer gear, the PA and everything. But it's not that. It's time investment thing. I'd rather put my time into open forum shows because there's no commitment, no rehearsals. You just show up, you get on the roster, and you're on stage in front of a great audience. And I've been doing that over and over again for like I said, about a year and a half, and I enjoy that because I know that it's more open and loose than a rehearsed project, but however, it's more fun for me and no commitment and minimal time investment. So that's why that works for me. Where I do my studio work here, it's kind of the same thing. I can do it when I want, depending on what's going on in the house. I mean, I don't want my kid downstairs sleeping or whatever. That's not a good idea. Be cranking out the sound stage, But, within reason, I can do my own time frame with that as well. And then plus it's more fun for me to write on guitar instead of regurgitating cover song classics just to get hired on the local circuit. I can just go out and get on stage in front of people. It's not about money for me anymore. It used to be about money, but then now it's more about the actual artistic end of it. And I don't need this to pay my bills, so that's another thing, and so that's really where I'm at. That's where my headspace is open forum shows, playing with other artists out there, doing shows like that in a non-committed sense, only committed to the show itself and to the audiences. They've been great for the last year and a half, by the way. Played to some big audiences with these artists that I play with, and small audiences, but they've all been great. So I just wanted to get that out there. We're going to jump right into the playing. So it's obviously all music theory based. I can show you books that I have here where I do all my workshops and where I do all my studying. This is where I do all my writing on my creation desk here / business desk, So I have, so my theory books down here. And then I have, actually, I think they're in my file over on the other side, over by the other side of the studio here. But I have, like bass grimoire, bass scales, different books like that, arpeggios from MI Institute, Musicians Institute, different books like that are standard notation. And then I think the grimoire is, I haven't looked at it in so long, I don't remember, but because I don't really study out of those books that much. Where I study is sight reading, online, sight reading, different pieces. I'll download and print out different pieces of music, and I have my theory notes, and then I make notes from instructors, and then I work from my notes more than I do actual workbooks. I do go in there, don't get me wrong, but I'm not working out of workbooks all the time. I'm working off from the notes that I take from music theory instructors online, and that's basically how I've done it for a long time. Back in the early days, it was, the instructors at school. In a jazz band, I had 4 instructors. So, Mr. Unk, Mr. Adams, Mr. Zofi, and Ms. Rowan. So they're the ones that jam this stuff into my head at a young age of sight reading and the importance of sight reading. And the importance of sight reading is that you don't have to remember everything. You're not just going by committed parts to memory. You can play anything because you can sight read, and it's a different mode of function. Once you learn key signatures, it makes it make a lot more sense in what you're reading. So you know what's natural, what's not, what's the difference between a natural note and just a regular note. The timing signatures, whether it's compound meter or whatever it is. I don't want to get into all that because we'll be here for an hour of me talking about it. But, and how the circle of fifths relates to the relative major and minor keys, the key signatures and how that relates to the stave. And then all those things are connected together. So it's a discipline to learn it, and believe me, it took me a long time of studying and getting stuff crammed into my rock and roll brain to actually make it click and then make it benefit me as a player. I don't market myself as a sight reader, but I can do it, because of the discipline I've done here, But, most of the time is committing parts to memory and playing by ear. And that's really more fun and less mechanical and less scripted. And that's why I love the open forum stuff, because it's open, loose. I get more bass solos than I do in rock formula. That's why I'm part of the blues community here in Northern Vermont. It's more of a progressive playing type of feel to it. And the audiences eat it up. They love it, and I love it. So, all right. So I'll just start with a couple of examples. A G major scale. So, and I'll take a couple different scales, and then I'll show you what I do, because I'm starting with a derivative, right? Because this is a derivative. So everything's trying to be the major scale in modern music, right? And Western music. Everything is trying to be the major scale. So all you're doing is flatting or sharping certain notes in the scale when you're progressing out to the next scale, and to the next scale, and to the next scale. You're just flatting or sharping different scale degrees, starting with a tonic, out to supertonic, mediant, submediant, leading tone, octave. If you're going beyond the octaves, the ninths and the tenths, and etc., it doesn't matter. It's the same concept of building from a derivative, and you're actually flatting or sharping specific notes, just like the difference between natural and harmonic minor, melodic minor, natural and harmonic minor. All you're doing is literally between natural and natural and harmonic minor is you're just flatting one scale degree. That's it. Half step. So semitone, remember, semitone is half step. Also major and minor. Remember what I always say? 3 half steps to grace. Well, that's what it means. You're going 3 half steps down. That's your relative major, and then 3 half steps up. So, like G, E minor. G major is a relative major of E minor, and in reverse. So when you're going sharp, E minor is a relative minor of G major, right? And it's the same all over the neck with C and A minor, It's the same thing. 3 half steps to grace. That's just my little thing. It's 3 half steps, So knowing that relative and major and minor keys helps you with, especially with writing and vocal arrangements and putting vocals over the music, and then knowing what's going to work and what doesn't work, what's too repetitive or what's too esoteric, what's too weird or isn't going to work because it doesn't click with lyrics. So this is more of songwriting stuff. So I don't want to get too much into that because this is a soloing workshop. But it is important to understand relative major and minor keys and how they relate to, like how the circle of fifths relates to everything, and how relative major and minor keys actually create the foundation for writing vocal-friendly music or even instrumental music. It doesn't matter. And for writing parts and patterns, it's basically a formula that works for different types of vibe, depending on what style of music you're playing. That's really the simplest way I can explain that. So we'll start with the G major scale, like I said. Everything's trying to be the major scale in Western music, right? So what I will do is, so if I'm doing, since this is solo, I'm going to try to stay on track. So instead of just... I don't know why I did that. So... because I wanted to show you the octave. going up into the upper position. I don't want to call it second position because that's depends on what finger you're in, second position, third position. Depends on your fingering and whether you're inclining or declining. And then there's open position, closed position, and like this whole bunch of things to unpack with everything I say. So I just want to touch on, the basic level of my concept entering into those different factors relating to music theory. That's basically what I'm talking about. So I will take the major scale. Okay, so we can take the top position of it, and in this case, I'm just using the G major scale. So let's say the song is in G major. So we'll just do a kind of a basic pattern in G major, and then I'll show you what I would do to solo over that using the G major derivative concept. So that's the key is G major derivative. So now if they said Chuck solo, front man, whoever's directing, usually the front man, will give me a stage cue or kind of apply things at a glance. So then I'll take that and run with it. So remember, G major derivative. So I'll go. Now this is just taking bits and pieces of the G major scale and turning them into riffs. So as you can see, I also broke out of the G major scale and then put blues scale in there. So you want to bring in other scales, or even arpeggios and bits and pieces, which arpeggios are just broken scales, kind of like major, minor, augmented, diminished triads, especially major and minor. So even if you break out of that G major scale derivative, it's okay, because as long as you come back to that major scale, whatever key it's in this case G major for the example, but then for me, I'm just going by my concept and what I do. So whatever works for you, go for it, but so if I want to do something a little fancier, a little faster, I may start with just playing the G major scale in a different timing. Not timing signature, but in a different feel. You know what I mean? Like, well, you can put the F sharp in there. You can do one string slides. There's nothing wrong with that. As long as you remember, unless you're doing mode switching, that you're still using the major scale derivative. That's the key. See, I don't want to. See, that would be G minor or G minor. G minor pentatonic, or I'm not doing that. This is G major. So remember, as you're doing, and you're inclining on the neck. To G major again. So you can float in and out of that mode a little bit. Like I brought in, blue scale, or, I can do it. Remember, octave G is here as well, not just here. So what I do, and this is another key thing, which remember, soloing, this is for if I'm soloing. that I am picturing that note. If I go, if I do an inclining progression where I'm doing, let's say, if it's, it doesn't have to be a one string slide. It can be just be changing position. But like I'll use one string slides sometimes. You know, you can see me do it live. At, you know, out with at the shows. You know. Even put some chromatic in there. You know. So, anyways, when I'm, like I said, there's an octave of G. Here's an octave of G, upper position. You know what I'm saying? Here's an octave of G. Definitely upper position, 12th fret here. So. I will visualize that note when I'm in the upper position progression part of that solo. But you've got to always come back to the beginning so it makes sense and you're not just getting lost in the oblivion. Because then that you can do that to a certain degree, but you want to have what I always call a thread of continuity. So. Major again. See? So, whether you're doing a a major 10th, or if you're playing, if you're going beyond and you're stretching out into like 10th, nines and the ninths and the 10ths and etc. You need to keep in mind where you're at and where you want to come back to. That's what I'm always thinking of. I'm not just aimlessly, blah, 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 whatever, There is a process going on, even when it's like that on stage at the the speck of a moment, in that moment, in that environment, your adrenaline's going a little more because now you're showcasing, right? So it's, everybody's watching you. Most of the time they're watching a singer or a lead guitar player, but when you get a solo as a bass player, this is bass orientated, right? Then everybody's watching you, even if it is just for, I don't know, 30 measures or whatever, or even less. So that's really what it is. Another thing is duration. So when I know it's coming around, the phrasing is coming around, and they're going to be calling it, back into the song, bringing everything back into the song. I'm talking about whoever's fronting, whoever's directing, and you can hear the song and the dynamics crescendo a little bit. Maybe it's coming back into the regular song phrasing out of your solo. So then that's when I automatically start thinking about what I'm going to be playing to close out that solo, so it makes sense, sounds good, people like it, and it doesn't just sound like a big mess, So that's what I'll do. So I'll just give you an example again. So it's. Let's say I'm usually, and you'll see me do this out live on stage, but I will take different arpeggios, like say A major triad if it's major key. Again, if it's minor key, then minor triad. So that would be a G minor triad, but being this is a major key example. So remember, you can take bits and pieces, and part of that is arpeggios. Another part of it is just taking scale form and breaking it up into different riffs And that's what I do all the time. You know, it's what I've done forever. You know, so that's really just a variation of the major scale. That's all it is. And remember what I said? I'm visualizing that upper position octave. Well, there it is. See me go right to it when I'm up there. You need to think of that as a basis, like regardless of what key it is. You know what I'm saying? So if it's A, then you know, there's your octave. There's your octave. There's an octave. See, I don't have enough frets, so. So if I had a 24 fret bass, obviously that, you know, but I like the traditional. I'm a purist, you know, so I like the standard jumbo frets 20 or 21. I think the jazz bass has 21 and these have 20. So you know, you're limited on your notes and the top and your top position, upper position, and second, third position on out. You know, but that's okay because I love the tone, killer vibe, and all that with these American P basses. You know, that's what I play. That's what I choose. That's kind of what I've come around full circle to. But not to get into gear chat. So back to topic. So. G major again. So always want to bring things around with your phrasing, and that depends on the length of the solo too. So if it's a longer solo, then you have more space to do more of this, you know, with the you know, arpeggios or broken up scales into riffs and everything that I'm showing you here that I do. It just gives you more space because you have more measures before you have to come back into the main song. When you come back into the main song, you shouldn't still be soloing. You should be back on the. You should be back into the groove, right? So back in the Vermont groove. Rest in peace, Ace. Back in the Vermont groove, not New York groove. I prefer Vermont. So yeah, so basically that's where it's at for me. Is I just take these different scale configuration. I can do this. I can show you the same exact thing with any scale. You want to know the scale, of course, and that's the theory. The theory derivative is knowing the scale first, being able the application, being able to actually play it, and then you can expand it and grow it like a seed that you plant and it grows, you know, and. The minor third because that's E minor G minor pentatonic. So do a little mode switching, working out the major third there before you come back to the root or tonic. in the octave position, doesn't matter. You still got to come back to the root or tonic, which would actually be down here, major, then octave. So take your scale degrees. If you're doing like, if you're working in seventh chords, you want to take your minor seventh, your dominant seventh, major seventh. Make sure, you're in the right mode. So I use minor sevenths quite often, And you can, then I can go into the octave there on the top position and then bring it back to the minor seven. G major again. See, it all comes around back to the beginning, more tonic of what it is you're playing, depending on what the piece is. Sometimes you can do, I don't know. I'm trying to think of ways to expand on the example piece here for this workshop. So, and sometimes you want to float out of that scale mode, like this is scale mode that I'm showing you. So you want to break out of that sometimes, and you want to do open position playing. So you'll see me do that all the time, and on guitar as well. G major triad in a progression like that. It's a little more melodic. Everything in major is melodic, Minor is more darker sounding and used more for heavier music and drop tuning, obviously, all over the place. But I use aspects of both modes, whether I'm doing the Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, Locrian, whether you're using the church modes, or I'm using just whether you're in major or minor mode with whatever it is you're playing. Need to apply those concepts depending on the mode, because sometimes it will sound, I don't know, dissonant, I guess would be the best adjective for, if you're doing mode switching where it doesn't fit. You want to try, sometimes I'll do trills. I'll use little trills. And that's really using legato technique. So trills are basically combined with legato technique, which legato is where you are using your left hand to move through the note progressions and less right hand. You're only picking notes every so often to keep it going. You know what I mean? So. Still sticking with the G major framework here, so. So, and I'm showing you, that's an example of open, what I do for open position playing, and I do it often. I mean, it's. I'll use a major sixth progression and move that around in open position. major scale. So, you can float around in the different, you can do mode switching. Just be careful because sometimes it might not fit the song. It might not sound good with what you're playing with the rest of the solo section, which I'm focused on soloing, not necessarily the phrasing of the song. Soloing is you're following the phrasing of the song, but it's a lot more. You're breaking out of the groove and you're doing more of this toolbox progressions thing because that's your time to shine, right? So whether it's 10 measures or 30 or 4 measures, so it's the same idea. So. And sometimes I'll just play around with it. Around a little bit. Now, I may not be doing this type of thing out live on stage. I already have this worked out. You don't want to be noodling too much and trying to figure things out when you're out live in front of an audience. I mean, I'm talking about rehearsal time. When you're in the live show, you want to have that stuff cemented. So if I can draw from this just like that, then I can be like, okay, I'm going to use this. And then I just go into it, So that's how you got to do it. It has to be instantaneous, and that comes from you doing your work and putting your time in here, so that when you're out there, you know what I'm saying, then you're going to play the best that you can possibly do and be the best you can be, and then that's what you have to do. You have to put the work in here to be good out there, and that's just how it is. Even with my online videos, I with my writing, my guitar work, or my solo bass stuff, I'm doing the same process off camera so that I can build my chops up, my skills of what I want to use in that particular set, or if it's just a single release or an EP, whatever it is, it's the same exact concept. Work in your derivative scale configurations or chord. It can be derived from a chord because, chords, scales, they all have notes in them that can be turned into solos, right? So, I'll take this G major chord and I can turn that into a solo, so. See how that just kind of comes around. I go back to, my tonic, which in this case is G major, just for this example, but you have to use that same concept no matter what key you're in, the 12 keys, and no matter what key you're in, you need to do the same approach in order. If you're using my concept, I'm just saying, there's a lot of different concepts out there, but that's what I do, so that's basically it, is I just take and G major again. How about that? So, no matter what you're doing, always come back to the tonic. Always. In soloing, I'm not talking about Song arrangements are different, you know, when you have bridge and choruses and going into different keys and whatnot, that's different. You want to follow the phrasing. I'm talking about soloing. You always want to keep that root note in mind no matter where it is you're going on the neck, because that's what's going to bring you back out of the chaos into your controlled section. You know, that's key, because otherwise you're just going to sound like it's just going to sound like a big mess. You know, it's just going to sound like you're lost or doesn't really fit what's going on. You know, those type of things. You don't want that. So, especially not if you're going to call yourself a professional, then you need to be a professional, right? So. So even if you're using harmonics, you get a little more melodic in your movements within that section. It just depends on the feel of the piece that you're playing. You know, you probably shouldn't be doing a funk solo to something that's mellow, or a decrescendo down the dynamics, and all of a sudden you're doing this nasty. You know, you got to use taste and filter it through your own playing style and what you want to apply to that piece. And I'm talking out on stage in front of people when you have a bass solo. I got to keep mentioning that because I'm not talking about regular groove bass lines where you're just playing parts of the song. You want to stick to what you're supposed to be doing for the most part. You can put a little bit of yourself in there, but you don't want to lose context with what was written originally, because the rest of the band's next to you on the stage, you know, and you don't want them looking at you going, what is he doing? you know, you get the stink eye from the band. You don't want that, you know, especially not the band leader. You know, you don't want the stink eye. No stinkies, you know. So I'll go to a different key. So, and I'll show you another example in E minor. So we'll do E minor, and we'll try the same thing with that. So, and then we'll put a chord change in there. So I'm just doing the chord pattern there. So it's basically going to relative major in this case. So from E minor, which, remember what I said earlier? What is that? G major. There you go. Ding, ding, ding. You win a prize. Hang on a second. I've got it for you right here. Nothing. So nothing but knowledge. All right. So. Take and build on that, relative major, and we will build on that, but we're going to build it from the tonic, which is E minor. We're not going to do the relative key. You can do that too, actually. You can go into your relative keys, or relative mode, E minor, relative minor to G major, and the same in reverse with the 3 half steps, But you want to take and make sure that you are getting the right feel and vibe for the piece that you're doing. So in this case, it's E minor is the main focus of that tonic for this example piece. So I want to take and solo in E minor in this case. So I'll show you what I'll do. So because you're in E minor, unless you're going to do mode switching. In this case, we're not. So now, if we were in E major, I would have added the major, the top position. But we're not in major. In this case, E minor. So back to E minor, same exact concept that I was doing in G major, except for it's E minor is your tonic in this example piece. So it's the same thing. See what I'm saying? It just comes to fruition right in front of you here. It's the same exact concept. It just depends on what mode you're in and the feel you want to get for the piece. That changes as far as, you know, what you're going to use in your toolbox in order to build on that. And that's where the skills come in with building your theory knowledge, your knowledge of scales, your knowledge of sight reading with bass clef, and learning the scale configurations from the books, online, however it is you do it, and and then applying it, because you got to apply the feel to it and put your own personality into it. Otherwise, you just sound like a robot and you're just regurgitating chords and scales, and you just sound like robotic. I've played with players like that where they play good, but they don't really have good feel for that instrument. In other words, if it's not directly off the record exact, then they don't know what to do. And I've played with a few players like that in the past. Then I've played with other players who are the exact opposite of that and have good feel and know the structure, but at the same time have great feel for putting their own style into it, even though they're doing a classic standard or something like that. Even if it's an improvised solo over an original solo that they make into their own, that's fine too. It's the same idea with bass guitar, and that it is guitar, really, or anything, any instrument, So you want to take that and, again, plant the seed, let it grow, I didn't win 3 national awards, been called by thousands of people a bass virtuoso, thousands and thousands and thousands of people over the years. But what does it all come from? This here, this little space, and just studying and being able to transcribe and to use sight reading to aid even if you're not going to market yourself as a sight reader, use it to aid your theory studies, because you can take and go through all different types of, it's just infinite. You can keep going and going and going and going, just like the Ever Ready Bunny, and it's just infinite. I mean, that's why people who think they know it all or whatever, they don't. If you're a music teacher, you don't know it all either. We're all just learning. We're students of the fretboard. It doesn't matter, So that's really where it's at. Is and for me as a professional player now for decades and decades, it's really just about the very raw basics of taking this instrument, making it your own through theory studies and knowledge and good feel, also pressure points. So again, it comes legato and the opposite. What's the opposite of legato? Staccato. There you go. So I'll show you. be an example of staccato. So we'll say A minor. So I'll just start with the A minor 7. So you can move it to dominant. Sounds better for this example, A minor. So moving to A minor for the tonic. The other example in G major and E minor. Okay, I showed you what I would do in E minor. I can expand on E minor some more, I guess, but I could keep going and going and going and going. Let's just move on to A minor. So that's basically, I would do the same thing. It's the same concept no matter what key you're in. If I'm in D flat minor, tone in there if you're working up to the octave like that in D flat minor. You always want to resolve in the, well, not always, you don't have to, but I try to always resolve in the tonic, and in this case I just jumped over to D flat minor, but let's go back to A. So in this case it would be A minor. So to A minor. So what I just showed you an example there in second position, upper position, is an example of legato technique. Now I'm not going to go break down every single note I played and tell you what it is, and you got to figure that stuff out for yourself, you know, and develop your own style and learning the scales and making your own configurations with them, creating your toolbox of riffs that you can pull out and conjure at any given time on stage at a glance and just do it. And that comes from putting your time in here, right? So that's what this is all about, you know. Example of legato feel in the context of the A minor key. So I'm trying to keep it simple. I'm trying not to go into too much, you know, too much all at once. So I'm breaking it down and just, you know, stick to like A minor pentatonic, A minor 7, and then I can work different progressions into those that scale and that chord combined into a formula that works for the entire section. So remember the minor triad, so you can do arpeggios in there or whatever, you know. When you're doing A minor triads, you can put those in there as riffs or use them as whole, you know, like some grooves have been made into complete songs using major, a lot actually, major and minor triads, you know. So. what's that? Abracadabra from Steve Miller, it's an 80s hit from Steve Miller Band, and that's a minor triad. Trying to stick to the A minor framework here, so regardless of what cover song classic, you can compare arpeggios and different, the triads too, and all that. Triads are how you connect up the neck as well. You can connect up the neck with the triads. I was just using, for the most part, triads there. So, you can use them to connect up the neck. Major triads, same thing. If we were in A major, A minor, A major, remember, all you're doing is taking and raising one note, a semitone. Not a whole tone, a semitone. Whole tone, you'd be, you want a semitone. So in the leading tone that you add in on an A minor to major scale, you add in the leading tone, which is what? Half step below the octave. So that's how you create the major scale. Obviously, guitar, there's more strings and more notes to consider. This is bass, so it's the same idea. This is an A major chord on a guitar as well. I could pick up one of my Les Pauls, and there's the A major chord, so. But I'm keeping it simple, not to get too much into, esoteric derivatives that I use for a lot of different variations and all that kind of, because it'd be a long workshop for me to break down all that stuff. I'm just showing you all the basics on what I do to get my attack on this thing out live, regardless of what bass I'm on. It's all the same thing. Bass is a bass, whether this is a, $200 Squire knockoff or the real thing like this, or my other ones, it's the same concept, excuse me. So hopefully you all get something from this, in that those are some of my concepts and approaches to my bass soloing when I'm doing different solos out live with other artists, or if I'm doing solos here from my my solo bass performances that I use for my hard rock stuff. Instrumental bass music that I write just for bass. It's the same concept with that, actually, that I do. It's just there's less of it out live because I'm playing with other performers, and you're actually playing, classic standards and blues songs and rock songs and whatever, whether it's rockabilly or whatever it is, So, you need to keep in mind the parts, number one, and then you can work your derivatives in as you get your space to do it. If you get the space to do it on a particular piece. Also keep in mind, having good taste and making it work for the band. It doesn't matter. You can overplay till you're blue in the face. Nobody cares, They want to hear the songs, and they want to hear, yes, you get your spotlight, and you want to play good in the soloing, but you want to play the song. The song comes number one. The song comes first. Always, doesn't matter, And that's basically it, So when you get your time to do it, you attack it just like this with a vengeance, but it all comes from the knowledge that you gain through studying, from your theory notes online or from books or whatever. However it is you do it, music teachers, music lessons, whatever. And then apply that, to the fretboard so you understand it, and so you can absorb, recreate with it, and also conjure it up at any given time at a moment's notice. That's a big thing there. because you really want to take that knowledge and make it into something that's useful for you as a professional performer, instead of just stuff that you can't even use anywhere. You know, that's really, I mean, that's fun, but if you can't use it, then it's just you in your home studio, which I have some of that kind of stuff too, but I'm applying this really to live playing out on stage, you know, in this workshop. So where am I going to use tap on? You know, nowhere, you know, but here. So. So there's another thing I'll do just to give you one last pointer of my concepts and approach to solo bass when I get solo sections out live with other bands, or if I'm here actually in the studio doing my solo bass performances. I'm talking separate from sound stage, separate from my guitar work, you know, although it's a similar thing with my guitar soloing, just it's guitar instead of bass. But with the, you know, for the sake of time and not being over explanatory, I will hang on specific notes in a scale. So sometimes it's mode switching. It's not even in that scale. So in this case, example I just played, I can break that down a little bit just to show you, because it relates to my concepts, and I do it all the time. There's the minor scale, you know, the A minor pentatonic. Careful, differentiate major and minor, you know, so, and also hexatonic, you know. And know how to change those notes around so that you can switch positioning, or not positioning, so that you can give a different vibe to that scale. And again, that comes in with the same approach I've been talking about this entire workshop. Use your derivatives and then build on them by adding different notes and half steps in there that maybe aren't in the original scale. That's what makes it your own, is you put your own spin on what you're playing, and that's part of how you do that, as you, number one, mode switching. And so we'll get back to what I was saying before I get too far off track. But see, now that note is not in the A minor scale. It's not in the A minor pentatonic scale, which is what I'm deriving this whole last example off from. So. You know, I will take and hang on any, it doesn't even matter what note it is. It depends on the feel I'm trying to get. For me, how I do it personally out live on stage, or here, if I'm soloing in front of you on my online, for my online audiences as well. It's the same concept. To A minor. So you see how I was actually hanging on. See, that's not in the A minor pentatonic scale. It's not. So I will take that and I will change the scale degree, even if it's just to hang on one note for, say, a half a measure or one measure, depending on the meter. If it's 4, we'll just say 4/4, because that's the most common music. Not 5/4, not 7/4, not 6/8, not 12/8. You know, not compound meter. I'm just talking like 4/4. straightforward kind of stuff, rock and blues, and etc. So. So remember, and there's our A minor 7 again, back to the tonic for this example section of this particular example of the workshop. So you can see how I'm moving around. I was doing a little experimenting there just to show you all how I, develop my toolbox, develop my riffs arsenal that I've had for eons, and I don't just use the same thing all the time. I experiment around and expand. You want to expand. You don't want to just play the same thing forever. You can play. Oh, that's a cool scale, don't get me wrong. But you want to expand on that. So bring in the hybrid scale. I love the hybrid on guitar and bass. Andy Alidor taught me that, 15 years ago or something on guitar. And then I said, well, it works on guitar. It's going to work on bass most of the time. So what works on guitar will work on bass. So that's really where it comes in. It's a guitar scale that I learned in an Alidor workshop. And then I just take and it's similar to the pentatonic scale, except for you're adding extension onto the top position with half steps at the top position of that scale. So it's instead of you're going. The first time I just did it, that was a second variation. Also remember inversions where you're moving the root notes around. I use that a lot. I do inversions all the time. And I don't want to get into that with this workshop today because that's going to take us out too far what I wanted to produce for this workshop. And also counterpoint, moving the bass line around underneath the melody line. That's another thing. There's a whole array of riff structure and two-hand technique stuff that you can do with counterpoint, which I just showed you earlier, which is just simple. That's counterpoint. That's a very basic example. You can go deep into that, obviously all over the place. But that would be counterpoint. So again, I just want to mention them, but not get into those today. I can touch on those at another workshop or something like that to show you more of my variations and what I do in counterpoint and inversions, first, second, and third inversion. And what I do in terms of moving the root note around in order to get into the inversion to give you a different feel of the same scale, but because you're changing the root note around, it sounds different, right? So really with inversions, that's what you're doing is moving the root notes around. And I could get into that, but I don't want to get into all that today. So, but that's basically it, is I will take what I just showed you here in all these examples, and I did a little experimenting, a little noodling, but basically that's where it comes from. It is you find the weak spots, pound on it. So in this case, when I'm doing my legato, and it's a little more difficult to do on a P bass than it is a jazz bass, or and like an alembic, you can fly across the strings a little quicker because they're jazz basses that are acted basses that are made for funk solo bass. They're like the Stanley Clarke stuff. That's what he uses. He's used for decades as alembics because they have very good playability. So you got to work at it a little more, kind of like the Fender Strat versus the Gibson Les Paul. You got to work at it with the Strat a little more. With the Les Paul, your fingers just kind of fly across the strings with the smooth playability and everything, which is why I prefer the Les Paul over the Strat, because you get the Strat, you got to work a little more. With the bass, I prefer the P bass over the J bass. You do have to work a little more, but I like the sound better. That's why I like the sound of it better. And even though the playability isn't play as fast, you got to work on that a little more. So A minor 7. So you don't want to get into too much into stick to A minor. It depends on what you're building. If you want to get into more of prog rock, jazz, and more progressive styles of music like that, prog blues, and even some funk, progressive funk stuff, then of course you want to get into, say you can do an inversion there, or moving the root notes around. You can do the your chord stacking, and you can get into more complex stuff in there, but it all derives from what you're trying to do in the first place. So you need to not get lost in everything, and then just focus on your bullet points. And in this case, in this last example, it was A minor. So in A minor mode, I just chose A minor 7, but going to dominant 7th. It just depends on what it is that you are trying to accomplish sonically, and that's really what it's all about, So I guess that's about it for this workshop. Thanks for joining me, folks. And I'm going to close you all out today. Everybody have a great Memorial Day weekend. Thank you for following my work, everybody. Don't forget to give my Chuck the Bass Player page a like and follow for all of my professional bass work, whether it's here, out live on stage with other performers. Give my August Theory page a like and follow for all my original hard rock music on a guitar and vocal work, original stuff, all written by me, arranged, recorded, everything. You can check me out on Hard Rock Vermont out on YouTube. You can check my stuff out there, and you can also go on to, for my MP3 experience, full production, you can go into SoundCloud under my name, Chuck Rice. You can also go into my Reverb Nation for the same thing, but different sets, different time era from my catalog, and different sets, but all the same thing, all production, all done by me. I did have a guest drummer on, I think, 3 songs on the Reverb Nation. That was Larry Pine. He's on Driving and Crying cover song, Fly Me Courageous. He's on, we did a demo here, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago before he moved away. I think it's like six years ago now, maybe even close to 7. I don't remember. But Yeah, something like that. So he's on 3 of them. I don't. Oh, and one of my originals, All My Best Wishes. So there's 1 original and 2 covers that he's on. I want to give him credit because he was actually here with his rolling kit and recorded with me, and I mixed it and everything and played all the rest of the instruments and did the vocals and everything. So I just want to give credit where it's due. That's about it. I guess I will just close you all out. Dr. Smooth says goodbye, and we will see you at a stage near you. Well, maybe it won't be near you, but I'll record it. So you'll all be able to join me anyways, right? I'm Chuck the bass player, and thank you.